14 years have passed since that fateful night on the squid boat. It was a horrific event that took the life of my best friend, Tyler. It left me with a dark secret that I have cowardly hidden for half my life. Tyler and I grew up together in a small coastal town. When I hit my 20s, a series of reckless decisions caused me to lose all my money. My failed investments led to debt, constant pressure, and eventually a long spiral into depression. I had zero motivation to keep going. Tyler was the one who pulled me out of the gutter. He had been working on a commercial squid fishing boat for a while and invited me to join the crew. I thought it was a good way to start over. I hoped that being out on the open waves would help clear my head. The ship we worked on was about 100 feet long, which was big enough for a crew of 12. There were 5 Americans, including me and Tyler, and 7 migrant workers, mostly from Mexico and the Philippines. My initial thoughts about a fresh start were completely wrong. Life on that boat was brutal. We worked grueling shifts, barely slept, ate standing up, and had almost zero privacy. The hardest part wasn't the physical labor, it was the mental toll. The cramped spaces and long months at sea, combined with language barriers and cultural differences, made tension build up fast. It was always worst on the last day of a trip. Everyone was exhausted, but pushing to finish before hitting the docks. That was when tempers usually exploded. The incident happened during my second year on the boat. It was the final day of the fishing trip. The atmosphere on deck was heavier than usual. Everyone was worn out, but no one dared to slow down. In the middle of our shift, Tyler suddenly grabbed his stomach. He said he needed to use the restroom and asked one of the Mexican workers to cover his spot. Tyler was gone for nearly an hour. Being down one man meant the workload became twice as heavy for everyone else. I noticed the Mexican worker was furious. He was slamming his tools down and staring intensely at the bathroom door. When Tyler finally came back, he apologized. He explained there was a family emergency and he had to stay on the phone. We Americans just shrugged it off, but I'll never forget the look of pure, icy hatred that worker gave Tyler's back. After we finished hauling in the nets, everyone found a spot on deck to catch a quick nap. But Tyler said, "I need to make one more call just to be sure," and headed toward the bathroom area at the back of the ship. About 5 minutes later, I noticed 2 of the migrant workers whispering and laughing together in a strange way. Since everyone else was passed out from exhaustion, their high energy felt weird to me. But I was so tired that I drifted off before I could think more about it. When I woke up, the ship had already docked at the harbor. People were cleaning up and getting ready to head home, but Tyler wasn't there. At first, I figured he had just jumped off the boat early. But after I had been off the ship for a while and still didn't see him, I started to worry. I asked around, but nobody knew where he was. I searched every inch of that boat, but he was gone. Finally, I went to the captain. He told me that Tyler had been transferred to another ship out at sea so he could get back to shore faster for his emergency. I remembered Tyler's frantic phone calls, so for a moment, I actually believed it. But I knew deep down that transferring a person between ships in the middle of the ocean isn't that simple. The doubt kept eating at me. As soon as I got home, I went straight to Tyler's house. His mother opened the door and told me Tyler hadn't come home yet. Right then, I knew something was terribly wrong. I called the captain back. This time, after a long silence, he admitted that Tyler had fallen overboard and was missing. He claimed it was an accident that happened when no one was looking. Immediately after, he told me to stay quiet. He said the company would take care of Tyler's family with a payout, as long as the incident was reported as a simple accident. The way he spoke made it clear, if I didn't cooperate, there would be consequences for me too. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I was terrified of losing my job, and terrified of being dragged into a legal nightmare, so I stayed silent. The case was filed as an accidental fall at sea and was quickly closed. The sight of Tyler's mother's grief and despair at his funeral is something that will haunt me until the day I die. A while later, through the broken English of a Filipino crewmate, I learned the real source of the hatred. It turned out Tyler had discovered his wife was having an affair with that Mexican worker after inviting the guy over for dinner once. Since then, Tyler hadn't confronted him directly. Instead, he used his seniority to mess with the guy, constantly faking illness to dump the heaviest, dirtiest jobs on him. On that final day, Tyler disappearing into the bathroom for an hour was the breaking point for the migrant workers, who already felt discriminated against. Putting all the pieces together, I am certain there was no slip and fall. An experienced fisherman like Tyler wouldn't just fall overboard in calm weather. It's almost certain that while Tyler was at the back of the boat, that worker and his friends ambushed him and threw him into the ocean. I also believe the captain knew exactly what happened. He chose to cover it up to avoid legal trouble for the ship and the company. And I chose to say nothing. I quit the job a year after Tyler died. I couldn't take it anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought of him and imagined the moment he was thrown into the dark water. Even now, I carry a weight that I can never shake off. I had the chance to speak up, but I didn't. I let my fear and selfishness make the decision for me. To me, the ocean will always be a reminder of a buried truth and a friend I failed to protect. My name is Bennett, and I'm 32 years old. I have a steady job and make enough money to live comfortably. Over the last few years, I started thinking seriously about getting married. I wasn't in a desperate rush, but I wanted a long-term relationship with a real future. So I tried everything: blind dates set up by friends, coworkers playing matchmaker, and of course, the dating apps. But reality didn't meet my expectations. Most of my dates ended abruptly. There were some women I just didn't click with, but there were also cases where I thought things went great, only for them to ghost me completely. I couldn't figure out what the problem was. One day, a senior colleague at work offered to set me up with a woman named Emily. He said she was also looking for something serious. The date with Emily went better than I ever expected. We talked easily, and there was a genuine connection. I really believed this could be a great start, but when I got home and texted her, I got zero response. I figured maybe she was just busy or needed space. However, the next day my colleague called me. He sounded annoyed and asked what on earth I had done on the date. I was floored. I told him everything seemed normal. But he told me Emily was furious. She had chewed him out for introducing her to a terrible person like me. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. The whole situation left me feeling confused and hurt. I decided to call Ashley to vent. She's been my best friend since elementary school. Ashley gave me plenty of advice, but my mood didn't really improve. A month later, I went on another date. Ashley was my biggest cheerleader, constantly encouraging me. The date itself went well, but the result was the same: total disaster. I started to get really depressed about it. A few days later, my colleague from work approached me again. This time, he had news that left me shaking. He said Emily was spreading rumors that I was a domestic abuser. I knew this had to be a massive misunderstanding, so I decided I had to meet Emily in person to clear my name. I tried to stay calm and asked her what happened. Emily didn't even argue. Instead, she just showed me a text message on her phone. The sender claimed to be my ex-girlfriend. The message was a warning. It said I had physically abused her, and it included photos of arms and legs covered in dark bruises and even a few cuts. I went numb. I had never dated anyone by that name, and I certainly had never done those things. I tried calling the number immediately, but it was disconnected. I left that meeting in a total state of shock. That night, I met Ashley at a bar. She acted outraged on my behalf, and we talked late into the night. Eventually, Ashley said she was tired and headed home. I stayed behind to settle the tab, and that's when I realized she had left her purse behind. I took the bag home, intending to return it the next morning. But then, I accidentally noticed a strange phone inside the bag. The phone didn't have a passcode. In a moment of guilty curiosity, I opened it. As soon as I clicked on the messages, I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. The entire history of the slanderous messages sent to Emily and to every other woman I had dated was right there. The content was identical to what Emily had shown me. I kept digging. In the photo gallery, there were dozens of close-up shots of arms and legs covered in bruises, some of them still raw and bloody. I zoomed in on one photo. On the wrist in the picture, there was a small, crescent-shaped scar. I recognized it instantly. It was Ashley. I had seen that scar 100 times. I held my head in my hands, completely reeling. A moment later, I looked through the rest of the photos, and the pieces finally started to fit together. Every bit of this evidence of abuse came from Ashley's own body. I kept scrolling and found videos. They were clips of Ashley filming herself actually creating those injuries. She was using different objects to hit her own arms and legs to make the bruises and cuts. What horrified me wasn't just the act itself, but her expression. She looked excited. She looked like she was enjoying it, even while she was bleeding. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Then, another detail clicked. Every time I had a date, I told Ashley. She was always the first to know. She had also borrowed my phone multiple times, claiming hers was dead. I also realized that ever since I started dating, Ashley had been wearing long sleeves almost exclusively, regardless of how warm it was. It all made sense now. The next day, I met Ashley to return her purse. She acted completely normal, like nothing had happened. I didn't have the courage to confront her. The sense of betrayal was too much to handle. The person I trusted most in the world turned out to be the person who filled me with the most disgust. But what scared me even more was wondering what she might do next if I actually called her out. I just quietly handed back the bag, made some small talk, and walked away. After that, I cut off all contact. I changed my phone number, stopped going to our usual spots, and kept my distance from almost everyone. I didn't tell a soul about this. It wasn't because I wanted to protect Ashley. I just didn't want to drag anyone else into that nightmare. To this day, the whole thing haunts me. It's not just what I saw on that phone. It's the terrifying realization that someone can stand by your side for years, knowing every detail of your life, while silently destroying everything you have without ever leaving a trace. I don't think I'm brave enough to let anyone get close to me ever again.
My name is Kevin, and I grew up in Aurora, Colorado during my teens. I liked basketball, my mom's pizza, and throwing the stick for our dog at the park. What I didn't like most people, was school. But I had my best friend Miles, who helped me get through every day there. He and I would catch the bus home together after school, and no matter how bad my day was, Miles always found a way to cheer me up. At least until the day he suddenly became the one who needed comforting. Miles was a good kid, never late for class, always turned in his homework, and generally stayed out of trouble. Then one day, as he was walking out of the boys' restroom, he accidentally bumped into a teacher named Mr. Harlan, spilling a whole cup of hot coffee all over the teacher's nice white shirt. Miles apologized, but Mr. Harlan went ballistic. Harlan acted like Miles did it on purpose and immediately sent him a referral, a punishment even worse than regular detention. Mr. Harlan later told the principal that Miles had intentionally spilled the hot drink on him. This made the incident serious. As a result, the principal wanted to expel him. His parents pleaded with the principal not to. Eventually, the punishment was reduced to 2 weeks of daily after-school detention, including 2 hours on Saturday morning. His parents believed Miles didn't mean it, but they advised him to stay quiet, accept the punishment, and just forget about it for the sake of a peaceful school life. However, Miles's older brother was not so easygoing. He was 3 years older than us and wanted revenge. Although Mr. Harlan had never given him trouble, he had hated the man since he was at the school. Seeing his little brother treated so unfairly made him furious. He promised that we would get back at Harlan, saying that revenge is a dish best served cold. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Miles's brother explained, if we rode our bikes to Harlan's house that very day and threw 24 rotten eggs at the house, he would know exactly who it was. But if we waited a few months, letting him think we were being good and remorseful, he wouldn't know who did it. Furthermore, Harlan would be even less likely to know who egged his house if we did it on a night when similar things often happened. That night was Halloween. Halloween is a night when everyone is in costume. Performing pranks would be harder to identify. The date was set for October 31st. Miles's brother chose this night for the revenge. Another reason he told us to be patient was so we could figure out a way to truly make Mr. Harlan hurt. Not physically hurt, but a way to get back at him for bullying Miles. It took him a few weeks to come up with the idea. One afternoon, he shared his plan. Harlan was extremely passionate about classic cars. He had invested a lot of money in an early model Jaguar E-Type and kept it locked up in his garage. That car was his pride and joy, and we were going to destroy it. We started planning in early October. We discussed options like slashing the leather seats or keying the body, making sure to minimize noise as much as possible. The plan's execution would begin with the help of Miles' brother's friend, Logan. Nearly every night for about 3 weeks, Logan would ride his bike to Harlan's house, knock loudly on the door, then jump on his bike and ride away. Logan reported back that Harlan was getting angrier and angrier. By Halloween night, Harlan was used to running down the street chasing Logan, yelling and threatening to beat him up. That would be the perfect time for us to break in. Everything was going according to plan. On the morning of October 31st, I was incredibly excited. We pretended we didn't have any plans. Later that day, Miles and I walked to the bus stop and reviewed the plan. His brother had meticulously arranged everything. A few hours later, all 4 of us were near Mr. Harlan's house. Miles's brother's friend stealthily walked his bike up to the front door. After banging on the door, he waited for Harlan to open it, then yelled, "Catch me if you can, you old idiot," and rode off furiously. Harlan went crazy. He yelled something we couldn't hear clearly, then ran to his everyday car and sped off to chase the friend. We were overjoyed. The plan had worked perfectly. We knew we only had about 15 minutes before he came back. We put on gloves and ran to the garage. Miles's brother took a towel from his bag, and Miles held it pressed against the window. His brother then quietly punched and broke the glass. We climbed inside. When the light was turned on, there was no car. We couldn't believe it. It was a rather large, empty space. All the planning for months had been for nothing. I suggested we should leave, but Miles's brother wouldn't accept it. He said there had to be something in the garage that we could break or take away to truly make Mr. Harlan suffer, and he wouldn't leave until we found it. Miles pointed to an old, military-style trunk with a padlock. I knew what he was thinking. Inside would be old military or naval stuff, precious mementos. Harlan would be devastated if anything like that was lost. Miles's brother found a rusty bolt cutter nearby, and he and Miles started cutting the lock. They opened the lid and began rummaging through it. I saw several white envelopes filled with handwritten letters. There were a few pieces of jewelry, which Miles quickly stuffed into his pocket. Then his brother pulled out a framed photo of a young woman and a small glass vial containing a few brown hair clippings. I thought the girl was Harlan's niece. As far as we knew, he had no family. Miles's brother immediately snatched the photo from Miles's hand. He stared at the photo with a look of astonishment, his face turning pale. Then he quickly tucked the vial with the hair clippings into his pants pocket, carefully wrapped the photo in his jacket, and ordered, "Get out of here, now." We froze for a few seconds, but then quickly followed. We climbed out the window and rode our bikes furiously. All three of us were silent the whole way. Miles's brother didn't say a word, just rode his bike very fast with a tense look on his face. Miles and I exchanged confused glances, not understanding what was happening. Finally, we stopped in front of the police station. Miles's brother got off his bike, carefully took out the photo and the vial with the hair clippings, and walked into the station. Miles and I looked at each other with utter astonishment. We couldn't believe what was happening. About 10 minutes later, 3 patrol cars left the station, speeding toward Harlan's house. We followed behind from a distance. On the way, Miles's brother finally told us what happened. He remembered the case of a young woman who went missing on the Flatirons near Boulder. The photo of the girl in Harlan's trunk was that of the missing girl. Everyone had just assumed she was dead, but her body hadn't been found. He was 100% sure it was the girl in the photo, and the hair clippings and jewelry could be hers. He had gone into the station, reported that he had found a crucial lead in the missing person case, and gave the evidence to the police. When we approached Harlan's house, police cars were parked out front. Officers were pounding on the door, but no one answered. They pounded harder, yelling Harlan's name, still silent. Finally, they broke down the door and rushed inside. We held our breath, waiting. A few minutes later, officers came out, communicating over their radios, one of them shaking his head. It seemed they hadn't found him. Maybe he had come home, saw the rummaged items, realized his plan was exposed, and fled. That was actually a theory I overheard from the police. A few days later, the whole school was abuzz with the news. Mr. Harlan had been arrested at the border with Mexico. When police investigated further, they discovered the horrifying truth. Harlan wasn't just a suspect in one missing person case. He was a serial killer. In his house were many more photos, hair clippings, and jewelry from at least 5 young women who had gone missing over the past 10 years. All of them were trophies he had kept. The news spread through the town like a storm. People couldn't believe that a respected teacher was such a monster. The victims' families finally got answers after years of suffering. Some bodies were found based on Harlan's confession. We never told anyone about our role in this case. Miles's brother filed the report anonymously, and the police didn't inquire further about the source of the tip. Maybe they were too busy with the Harlan investigation. We never discussed that Halloween night again, but all of us were aware that we had contributed to saving many lives. If Harlan's secret hadn't been exposed, he could have continued killing for many more years. For me, that was the first time I understood that sometimes the right thing comes from wrong actions. We broke in for revenge, but ended up bringing justice to innocent people. But also, because of an impulsive act, we came way too close to a killer. Fortunately, we survived to tell the story. That Halloween night changed our lives forever, not because of the revenge, but because we unknowingly played a role in ending a nightmare for so many families. I'm Alex, and I'm from Texas. This story is about a childhood friend of mine named Derek. Derek and I lived in the same town and were close friends all through elementary school. By middle school, we had a core group of 4 best friends: me, Derek, Mason, and Liam. We were pretty much inseparable at school and at home, especially on weekend nights. This happened during our winter break, right before Christmas. That day, as usual, we walked to each other's houses until the whole group was together. Normally, we'd hang out at the baseball field or some empty lots. But that night, we had a different idea. While we were talking about creepy places, Mason brought up an abandoned house in the next town over. It was an old, 2-story, plantation-style house with tall columns and big windows. It had been empty for a very long time. So we walked to the house. It was freezing cold, but that couldn't stop the plans of a bunch of teenage boys. On the way, we excitedly talked about why the house was abandoned. But when we saw the old house towering in front of us, the feeling of adventure faded. No one wanted to go inside. We all just stood there, whispering to each other about how dangerous it looked. Then suddenly, Liam dared me to go inside. Alone? No way. Are you crazy? Liam then dared Mason, and he said similar things. But when he dared Derek to go inside, even for just a minute, Derek answered differently. What are you willing to bet if I do it? $5 for every minute you dare to stay in there. As soon as Liam finished speaking, Derek just smiled slightly, turned, and walked away. We watched Derek walk across the overgrown lawn toward the porch. The wooden steps creaked as he stepped up. The door was off its hinges, leaving a terrifying black hole waiting for him. When he reached it, Derek turned and told Liam to be ready to start counting the minutes. Liam gave a thumbs up to show he agreed. Then, Derek flicked on his lighter and cautiously stepped inside. We were all silent from that moment on. I imagined Derek running out in a few seconds in a panic, and then we'd all laugh together, but the silence lasted much longer than I thought. When the first minute was up, there was no sign of him. By the second, third, and fourth minute, we hadn't heard a single sound from Derek. If he keeps this up, you're going to be broke for months. Liam started to get worried. When Derek had been in the house for 5 minutes, Liam stepped into the middle of the yard and yelled, "Derek, you proved your point. Come out." But the entire house remained silent. Mason and I laughed about how poor Liam was going to be after the bet, but Liam didn't find it funny at all and yelled again for Derek to come out before spiders crawled up his pants. Derek still didn't make a sound. When it was almost 10 minutes, our mood changed from suspenseful to genuinely worried. All three of us had moved much closer to the house. We called Derek's name for a little longer, and then Liam announced that he was going to have to go in and find him. It wasn't about the bet anymore. We were scared, for our friend Liam went first, and Mason and I reluctantly followed. As we got close to the entrance, we started to hear movement from inside. "Derek, is that you?" But when we didn't get a response, the fear returned tenfold. We started to back up, ready to run, but then suddenly the person who stepped out was Derek. We all let out a huge sigh of relief, because he was walking normally, not running, and showed no signs of being hurt. "What the heck, man? You scared us to death." I was waiting for Derek to start laughing and call us all chickens, but he just walked right past us. We were confused and quickly ran after Derek, asking what had happened inside the house. Mason and I ran around to get in front of him. "Hey Derek, what went on in there?" Suddenly I saw Derek was crying. "Derek, what the heck is wrong?" Then Mason tried to stop him by grabbing his shoulder. Derek stopped, but instead of calming down and answering, he became aggressive. He pushed Mason away and screamed, "Get away from me!" He yelled so loudly that his voice cracked. We stood still, looking at each other, and a few seconds later, we kept following him. No one knew what to say. It was genuinely frightening to see him in such a panic. When we reached our familiar town street, we called out, demanding that Derek stop and explain everything. But once again, he totally ignored us. It was Liam's turn to run ahead and block his path. Derek tried to avoid Liam by walking around him without saying a word, but then Liam stepped back in front of him. Derek started swinging his fists, hitting hard enough that Liam fell backward. Mason and I ran up to try and stop them. Derek started swinging his fists at us too. "Don't touch me!" And all the time, I had known Derek. I had never seen him act like that. He looked crazed, with wild eyes and a red face. He was seriously intent on hurting us if we got too close. We let Derek walk ahead until he turned onto a street and disappeared from sight. We then walked home. Mason believed Derek had seen a ghost or some kind of spirit, but Liam didn't buy that. He thought Derek had seen something scary enough, but it couldn't be a ghost. Liam insisted ghosts weren't real. He thought maybe it was a dead body. It was all just guesswork. We never intended to go back and check out that house. We hoped Derek would tell us what had happened. Close to Christmas Day, I called Derek. His mom answered. When I asked if I could talk to Derek, she said he wasn't feeling well. I paused for a few seconds, long enough for Derek's mom to ask if I was still there. I gathered my courage and asked if Derek had acted strangely when he got home the night before. It was her turn to pause. Then she said Derek was fine. He was just a little tired. Before I hung up, Derek's mom said she would tell him to call me back whenever he woke up. I waited, but I didn't get a call. I decided to call him a second time. It was still his mom who announced that Derek wasn't well and wouldn't be joining us for our Christmas party. We went to Derek's house to exchange gifts, as we did every year, and really wanted to see him. But when we got to the door, Derek's mom said he was too sick to have visitors. So, there was no gift exchange that Christmas. A week after Christmas, I called Derek and asked if he could talk about what happened. If you ask about that again, you won't be my friend anymore. Derek stressed every single word, and I didn't ask again. He said the same thing to Mason and Liam. We still hung out after that, but it wasn't as fun as before. That abandoned house was eventually torn down. His family moved away too. Derek met with us to say goodbye. Even though we tried to keep in touch, maintaining the friendship only came from our side. Before long, we lost touch permanently. Years later, we were men in our early 30s by then. We got the sad news that Derek had died from a drug overdose. At the funeral, we heard from people who knew him that he had struggled with addiction for years. He was even in such a bad place that he had to beg people for money. Derek really lived a very difficult life. He never reached out to us, even during his most desperate moments. We think it had something to do with what he saw in that abandoned house, and truly regret that evening. To this day, no one knows what Derek went through during those 10 minutes in the abandoned house. That secret will stay with him forever. Rest in peace, Derek. I still remember you, my friend. My name is Valerie. On that fateful day, September 6th, 2019, I had no idea that I had stepped into a vehicle heading straight to the gates of hell. I didn't know that my life was separated from death by only a thin panel in the back of a truck. It was a stormy evening in Anchorage, Alaska. The rain was pouring down, and the bone-chilling cold made me shiver. I had nowhere to shelter. People on the street avoided me like I carried a plague. I just wanted a place to stay dry and hide from the freezing wind that swept through the empty streets. I was exhausted and starving. I was shivering under the awning of a 7-Eleven convenience store. A gray pickup truck pulled over to the curb. I didn't think twice. I just wanted to get out of the rain. The man behind the wheel looked completely normal. He even seemed polite. He introduced himself as Brian. He had a very distinct voice, deep with a South African accent. He nodded and told me I could have a ride. Inside the warm truck, Brian didn't say much. He stopped to buy some drinks and told me to wait in the cab. That was when my desperation took over. I leaned down to pick up my cheap phone that I had dropped. I saw another phone lying right next to it. I grabbed both and shoved them into my pocket. I thought I could sell the extra phone to pay for a motel room. A few minutes later, the man came back. He didn't say anything and just kept driving. Eventually, he dropped me off near the abandoned shack where I usually slept. He drove away without looking back. Later, I found an old church where I could plug in the phone. I pulled out the strange phone to check it. The battery was still good, and it wasn't locked. I opened the photo gallery. At first, it was just pictures of hotels and selfies of the man who gave me a ride. But then, I saw a folder that made my blood run cold. It was titled, Homicide Marriott Hotel, Midtown Anchorage. Even though I felt terrified, I clicked on it. The first video showed a woman crying and struggling on a hotel bed. She was desperately reaching for the air. A man was holding her throat tight. He was screaming horrible things at her. Within seconds, I recognized the voice. It was the man who had just given me a ride. I heard him clearly say, "You aren't leaving here alive. I'm killing you." I shut off the screen immediately. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. Pure terror washed over me. I was a homeless woman who had just stolen a phone from a serial killer. I worried that if he used a GPS tracker to find me, he would kill me to keep me quiet. I spent the next few days in a state of extreme paranoia. I hid under bridges and couldn't look anyone in the eye. I felt like I could hear that South African accent right behind my back at every moment. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the police station and handed over the phone. My hands were shaking uncontrollably while I told my story. In my head, I was sure they wouldn't believe a homeless, unemployed thief like me. But they did. They were absolutely shocked by what I brought them. The police identified the man as a local resident of Anchorage. He had been a suspect in a previous case, but they never had enough evidence to convict him. The video on the phone proved he had murdered a woman in a hotel room, but there was something even more horrifying. The police checked the security footage from the 7-Eleven on the night I got the ride. They discovered that while I was sitting in the warm cab of the truck, there was a dead body in the back. It was the victim from the video. He had killed her just one day before. I had been sitting in a truck carrying a corpse for 20 minutes, and I had no idea. Brian was arrested as soon as his plane landed in Alaska after a vacation with his wife. At first, he tried to act like a victim. He claimed his things were stolen from his truck. But then the detectives put the SD card in front of him. They pointed out photos of his own shoes at the crime scene. The monster inside him finally came out. In the interrogation room, Brian didn't just admit to killing the woman in the hotel, Kathleen. He became strangely honest in a sick way. He confessed to another murder from 2 years earlier. The victim was Veronica Abauchuk. He told the story coldly. He picked Veronica up while she was drunk. He took her to his house while his wife was away. He shot her in his garage simply because she wouldn't take a shower. He was afraid her smell would make his wife suspicious. The detectives described Brian as a classic sociopath. On social media, he had a different personality named Bradley. He lived a perfect double life, a good husband and a hard worker, but also a predator who craved the feeling of choking the life out of people. In the end, he was sentenced to prison with no chance of a lighter punishment. In the courtroom, he just sat there in silence. His face was cold, as if all the evil things he did were just normal business. And what about me? I am still homeless. But whenever it rains, I never step into a stranger's car anymore. Stealing that phone was a mistake, but maybe God planned for it to fall into my hands. If it weren't for the quick greed of a desperate person, Brian Smith might still be driving the streets of Anchorage, looking for his next victim. This story is inspired by a true case. In 2019, in Anchorage, Alaska, a homeless woman named Valerie Kassler accidentally stole the phone of Brian Smith. It contained videos of Brian brutally murdering a woman at a Marriott hotel, with him saying, "I'm killing you." Valerie hid for days out of fear before turning the SD card over to the police. Brian was identified as the killer of Kathleen Jo Henry and later confessed to killing Veronica Abauchuk. Brian was sentenced to 226 years in prison in 2024 Investigators suspect he may have more victims. I am Martha, 32 years old, and a single mother. My 6-year-old daughter Sophie and I live in San Jose, one of the most expensive cities in the US. Our life is not a cozy life. You could say it's quite difficult. My husband passed away when Sophie was 4 years old due to a car accident. Sophie has a disease related to her eyes and needs surgery soon. Otherwise, it could affect her ability to see in the future. Although the government provided medical and educational support for us, the high cost of living in San Jose, combined with my unstable job situation, together, they forced me to work many long hours doing various jobs just to make ends meet. I have considered moving to another city to live, but there are many constraints that prevent us from doing so. One day when I picked Sophie up from school, I received bad news. My father had passed away suddenly that afternoon, with the initial cause determined to be a heart attack. I don't have many relatives. The only one I keep in touch with is my father, who was 67 years old and lived nearly 400 miles away from me. I arranged my work and took Sophie to her grandfather's house in Sacramento, California. After taking care of my father's funeral, I was scheduled to meet with his assistant to discuss some matters. The man name's Benny. He had worked for my father for nearly 20 years. Benny took me to my father's art gallery. My father was a painter. Benny introduced me to a painting of a stunning woman with a cold gaze looking straight ahead. She was bound with a golden chain. I wasn't sure why, but I felt a cold chill running down my spine looking at that painting. Benny said that this painting was demanded by a wealthy businessman at a very high price. And now, since he'd passed away, I am the legal owner of this painting and countless other paintings my father left behind, as dictated by inheritance law. To be fair, I really didn't care much about my father's paintings, and I had always felt that way since I was little. After discussing and fixing a reasonable price with Benny, I decided to sell the painting. That would be a good sum to taking care for Sophie. However, the painting had a few minor defects due to not being properly maintained. The paint on the woman's eyes was peeling and needed to be repaired before it could be sold. Benny said he would hire a talented artist to quickly work on the painting. Sophie and I would stay here for a while until the sale was completed, also for her summer break. When I entered my old childhood room, a pleasant sense of nostalgia hit me all at once. The room had remained exactly the same for many years. The next morning, Benny brought a young painter named Logan. Logan analyzed a lot about the painting for me, but it's all yada yada to me at this point. I gave him a price and the time frame for him to finish the painting as soon as possible, and he agreed. As Logan began his work, I lingered back to see my father's final work. The woman's eyes in the painting were indeed beautiful, yet terrifying to look at. It felt as if she was staring right at me, no matter what angle I viewed her from. When I stared intently, suddenly those eyes moved. The woman in the picture just blinked at me. I jolted and called out to Logan in a panic. He turned to look at me, but when I looked back at the painting, it had returned to normal. Maybe it's just the trick of the eyes. When I returned to the house, I didn't see Sophie anywhere. I called out her name several times without anything back. I ran upstairs, and as soon as I entered the room, I saw Sophie sitting on the bed. I furiously asked her why she hadn't replied when she heard me calling. Sophie sat on the bed, trembling, her face pale, and she spoke in a muffled whisper. "There's someone under the bed." I stood frozen, staring at my daughter. Sophie looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. I could no longer control my breathing. My mind thought this was just her childhood fear of being alone, but I didn't act decisively. I bent down lower toward the underside of the bed and slowly leaned forward to look over. The closer I got, the more could I feel someone's breathing there, but there was nothing down there. "It's just a trick of the eyes, sweetheart. Don't be afraid," I reassured Sophie, but immediately her innocent brown eyes stared back at me widely. I jumped up and screamed aloud, picked Sophie up, and dashed toward the door. Feeling something was amiss with my daughter, I stopped and took a closer look. Ophie's eye sockets were deep red, blood streaming down her small face and over her white dress. The eyes that I just saw under the bed were of Sophie. I pushed Sophie away, sank to the floor, and screamed in fear. The door swung open. Logan rushed in with Sophie in his arms, looking at me panikedly. I looked at Sophie, and then back at the image on the floor. It had disappeared. Rushing over to Sophie, I hugged her tightly, then checked on her face carefully. Logan said that Sophie had been in the shed with him since I left, so it was all in my head, stressed up and tired. It was still in a mess after all this time, ever since my husband passed away. After I calmed down, Logan told me to go to the shed. He had something he wanted me to see. The woman's eyes in the painting had been repaired by Logan. However, near her face, some paint had chipped away, revealing one eye. That eye was so familiar, yet I couldn't recognize it. What was hidden behind the perfection of this painting? Logan said he was creeped out by the woman's gaze, feeling as though he was being watched. Although I had the same feeling as Logan, I didn't told him about it. Instead, I told him to fix the painting quickly by tomorrow, and I would happily pay him extra. I just wanted to leave this house as soon as possible and wouldn't mind pushing anything further. That night, I woke up to find Sophie not beside me. I hurriedly searched for her. I checked the bathroom, living room, and kitchen, but couldn't find Sophie anywhere. Remembering what happened this morning, I ran down to the storage to look for Sophie. As I opened the door and stepped in, I avoided the creepy gaze from the painting and called my daughter's name. "Mom!" Sophie's voice called out from deep within the shed. I had never been inside this shed before. All I knew was that it housed hundreds of my father's paintings, and I had always tried my best to not been too curious about them. Through the dim light of my phone's flashlight, I found Sophie. She was trembling and clung tightly upon coming close to me. Just as we turned to leave, I shone the light ahead. That woman's face without eyes suddenly appeared. I screamed and held Sophie tightly. A few seconds later, nothing else happened. I took a deep breath and continued to shine the flashlight ahead. This time, it was a woman with bruised skin, smiling, but smeared all over with red blood. I was startled at that, yet I was sane enough to cover Sophie's eyes with my hand. And this time, I decided to come closer to look at that person again. It seemed she was the same as the woman without eyes in the picture I had seen earlier. I fumbled in the darkness searching for the switch to turn on the lights. As soon as the lights came on, I was shocked to see many horrific images surrounding me. There were dozens of paintings depicting that very same woman, each showing different brutal methods of torture. The two horrifying women I had seen earlier were among the paintings here. Each painting clearly recorded the date and time it was created, accompanied by my father's familiar signature. One painting marked the last date as June 13th, 2023, featuring the beautiful brown eyes. I easily recognized that the woman in the paintings here was the same as the one in the painting Logan was fixing. What's peculiar is that the woman in these paintings, despite being tortured, still had beautifully painted eyes that were meticulously done. Sophie's cries jolted me out of my trance of thoughts. I took her back to the room, and Sophie quickly fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up early. The first thing I did was return to the shed. I scraped the paint off the painting. Behind that strange eye, a man's face emerged. It was my father. I used both hands to scrape off all the paint, destroying the valuable painting. Another painting appeared. The woman tightly bound with chains was being strangled by my father pulling one end. Despite the blood oozing out from her broken body, her beautiful brown eyes were still glaring coldly from her disfigured face. I sought out Benny. I wanted to learn about my father's life when I wasn't around. It took a long time to convince him, and finally, Benny told me the whole truth. My father had a special passion with women's eyes. After many years of searching, he found Donna, the model for the woman in the paintings. Donna was both his lover and his model for all the paintings. Gradually, my father's personality changed. He became more and more possessive and controlling. He realized that the only thing he wanted was Donna's eyes. He once told Benny, "The most beautiful eyes of a woman are when they are in pain." The images in the shed were the continuous tortures he inflicted on Donna, and what remained in the end was the eyes, the thing he desired the most. The day Benny called me to inform me of my father's passing was the day he discovered my father in the shed, slumped aside the painting of Donna's eyes. My father died in a slumped position, with both hands holding his own eyes. I burned all of my father's paintings along with his painting tools. I took Sophie back to San Jose and put my father's house up for sale. I didn't want to keep anything related to my father or his terrifying works. Only true art deserves to exist.
I'm Thomas, 18 years old, and a first-year student at the University of South Florida, Florida. Everything is new to me, from the vast campus to the new friends I've made. The university has arranged for me and other first-year students to stay in the dorms. My dorm isn't the most modern or luxurious place, but it's enough for me to live comfortably and study. I share a room with a third-year student named Anthony. From the first time I met him, I could sense that Anthony was different. He's very quiet, almost to the point of being so silent that it feels like he doesn't exist. Anthony never speaks up on his own, and I didn't dare ask too many questions because I didn't want to bother him. Occasionally, I could only hear soft sounds coming from his side. I almost never saw him leave the room during the day, except when it got dark. Anthony never turned on the lights in the room. There was only a faint light from the window, whether it was day or night. When I first met him, I could say that Anthony was very handsome, but there was something oddly unusual about him. Anthony's skin was so pale, it was hard to believe. It wasn't the healthy, fair type, but rather a sickly, pale skin that was almost translucent. This could be due to him not being exposed to sunlight for a long time. His pale skin only made Anthony's full red lips stand out even more. But what truly sent a shiver down my spine whenever I looked at Anthony was his canine teeth. When facing Anthony, I couldn't help but notice the long, sharp, canine tooth that peeked out from behind his red lips. It made me feel like I was facing a creature that wasn't human. The way Anthony moved only made that eerie feeling more pronounced. He didn't walk naturally. Every step was very gentle, making no sound at all. Anthony's strangeness made me feel scared and panicked on more than one occasion. One evening, I was reading at my desk. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a few soft thuds echoing. It was hard to pinpoint where the sound was coming from, as light was a luxury in my dorm room. When I turned my head, my gaze accidentally caught sight of Anthony. With the appearance I had described, Anthony startled me, making my whole body jump. But what I saw in Anthony's hand the next second was even more shocking, to the point that my whole body went numb and froze. A glass cup. Inside is a dark red liquid. That deep, dark red color made me shiver involuntarily. Anthony didn't even pay any attention to me. He drank the liquid slowly, sip by sip, as if he were enjoying a special drink just for him. When the liquid in the cup was almost gone, Anthony gently closed his eyes, feeling the taste, a look of satisfaction evident on his face. I could only watch every movement. My heart beat faster. The feeling of insecurity increased more and more. The fear inside me seemed to rise in waves from within my chest and then spread throughout my body. Can't explain the uncomfortable and creepy feeling when I saw him drinking it. I didn't dare ask.
didn't dare look for too long. Quickly turned away, trying not to let the confusion in my heart take over. But I couldn't concentrate on the book anymore. Is he a vampire? Since that night, I can't get this thought out of my head. Every time I look at Anthony, I see his skin getting whiter and his eyes deeper. I started avoiding Anthony and didn't dare tell anyone what I thought. Part of me wanted to believe that I was just imagining it all, but the other part of me admitted that strange thoughts were slowly taking over my mind. I started trying to stay in the library longer to avoid having to go back to my room, but the obsession with Anthony still wouldn't leave. I felt more stressed and tired, couldn't concentrate on studying, couldn't sleep well, and couldn't do anything but worry. I tossed and turned all night, listening to every sound from outside the room, afraid that Anthony would suddenly appear and I wouldn't be able to escape. Every time I see him, I feel like there is a predator stalking me in the dark, waiting for the opportunity to attack. The more scared I became, the more I paid attention to Anthony. I observed his every gesture and action closely. From fear, I gradually got used to fear and turned it into curiosity. One morning, I saw Anthony wake up early. He happily hummed a song, went to the bathroom to take a shower, and came back with a completely different appearance. Anthony is handsome, with vibrant white skin, neatly combed hair, and fangs have also disappeared. Anthony put on a white shirt and neatly ironed trousers, ate a sandwich and drank another glass of dark red water, then left the room with the file in hand. I was stunned for a moment, stuck in thoughts of whether the person just now was Anthony or not. Getting out of bed, I walked over to Anthony's glass of water, picked it up, and slowly brought it up to my nose to smell it. "Pomegranate juice," I exclaimed in surprise, sinking deeper into the feeling of confusion, not being able to do anything decent that whole day. That afternoon, when I returned to my room after class, as soon as Anthony saw me, he happily greeted me. Anthony was extremely excited, boasting about the fact that his graduation thesis, researching the psychological phenomenon of vampires, was highly appreciated. I feel lucky that I am smart enough to reason and understand everything for myself. A feeling of surprise and shock rose within me. All of my doubts about Anthony turned out to be just illusions that I created in my mind. Nothing more and nothing less. Luckily, I didn't do anything to embarrass and regret it.
My story begins on an autumn night, with the weather starting to turn cold. Everything was as quiet as usual at my small farm. I am Alan, a man in my 60s, living alone since my wife Susan passed away from cancer. This house used to be filled with laughter and love, but now it only holds memories, items that are missing their owners, and my beloved dog, Max, who is my only companion. That night, I couldn't sleep. It seemed like the cold in my heart wouldn't let me rest. I stepped outside, breathing in the cool night air, with Max by my side. Since Susan left, I have often suffered from insomnia, and taking evening walks has become a habit of mine. Max and I wandered around the garden, under the dim moonlight, and the rustling sound of dry leaves falling. Everywhere I looked, I saw familiar images of Susan. I felt so happy, yet it made me feel even more lonely. As we passed by the window of my wife and I's bedroom, the room I had left empty since Susan's passing, a shadow flashed by very quickly. I stood frozen for a few seconds, wondering if that shadow belonged to someone. The room had been empty for a long time. I never allowed anyone to enter and always kept the door locked. There was no reason to accept that appearance, except to think that someone had broken into the house. I was angry and quickly ran back inside, grabbing the rifle I had registered a long time ago, just in case something happened. Max walked beside me, staying close enough to understand the expression on his owner's face.
We walked together towards the bedroom. After the lock was gently undone, I kicked the door open and rushed in, with the rifle tightly in my hands and my finger ready on the trigger. But the room was completely normal, with no signs of any break-in. I looked around every corner, checked the wardrobe, peeked under the bed, but all that surrounded me was silence. I sighed in relief, thinking it was just a bird flying by. I patted Max's head to comfort him, and together, we returned to the room on the ground floor. The next day, I woke up, and Max was not in the room as usual. I called for Max, but he didn't appear. I searched everywhere in the house. Finally, I discovered him standing in front of the bedroom door, his eyes bloodshot and growling non-stop, as if something was making him feel threatened. I approached slowly and called Max, but he only growled more, refusing to move. I stood there silently, my heart filled with confusion. Max is a smart dog. He wouldn't be making noise unless he sensed something unusual, but sometimes a strange smell in the air could make him uncomfortable. I comforted Max by patting his head, hoping to make him feel better. Since that morning, I've always felt a sense of unease. Max is not a stubborn dog, nor does he bark unnecessarily unless it's an emergency. Yet he still stood growling in front of the bedroom door, a place that now only held coldness and emptiness. I comforted Max and paid more attention to him, telling myself that it was just his keen senses reacting to a strange smell. But a week later, everything began to get even more strange. Sometimes I would hear footsteps in the middle of the night. They were soft and definitely not Max's. The bedroom door would sometimes open on its own, even though I was sure I had locked it securely. One morning, I discovered Susan's wedding dress, the dress I had carefully folded and placed in the wardrobe, now lying on the floor. I started to worry for real. The house, that was once my safe haven, now seemed to have something invisible lurking within it. A chilling feeling crept in, as if someone were watching me every time I passed by that bedroom. Max also became more tense. He no longer wandered around the house comfortably like before. Instead, he would often lie in front of the door, his eyes wide open and alert. Then one night, when it was pouring rain, I heard scratching at the door. The noise was coming from the bedroom door. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and this time, fear wouldn't let me ignore it any longer. I decided that I had to get to the bottom of it. I grabbed the flashlight, my heart pounding as I approached the room. Max was standing there. This time, he didn't growl, but just silently stared at me, his eyes filled with worry. I bent down to reassure him, then reached for the door handle. The door slowly creaked open, and the space around me was engulfed in darkness. The flashlight beam illuminated, and I saw a figure sitting at the edge of the bed, a faint shadow that I never wanted to face. My heart seemed to stop, my hand gripping the flashlight tightly, unable to move. The figure slowly turned around, and I froze in shock. It was Susan, her face pale, her eyes empty, and the weak smile I remembered turning into a twisted, eerie grin. Could it be Susan's ghost? Why is she here? In that moment, I realized something. This room not only held memories, but also contained the unresolved pain of Susan that had yet to find peace. She had never left here, never truly rested in peace. My loneliness, my pain, and my longing had kept her here, preventing her from finding peace. That was the reason I always felt her presence in this house. I sat down on the floor, my heart racing, tears streaming down my face. Looking at Susan's figure, I realized that I had trapped her. What I had been feeling all this time was not the intrusion of a stranger, but the presence of my own memories. Memories of the one I missed every single moment. Susan, I miss you so much. A cold breeze swept through the window, and I startled awake, finding myself lying on the floor, holding Susan's wedding dress in my arms. Max quietly approached and lay down beside me, his eyes softening. A sense of peace washed over me as I understood everything. The house felt lighter, as if the burden that had weighed on me all this time had finally been lifted. In the evenings that followed, I no longer heard footsteps, nor did I feel that chilling sensation when passing by the bedroom. Max also returned to his usual self, happy and comfortable as before. Now, I know that Susan has truly gone, and the only thing I can do is cherish the beautiful memories we once shared together. I must continue to live joyfully and happily, just as she would have wanted. I will still take evening walks with Max, still remember Susan, but no longer with the pain and regret. I am Stephen, and the terrifying story I am about to tell took place during the recent New Year, so I remember every detail clearly. Peter, my best friend from college, asked me to come house sit and take care of his beloved dog. Peter was someone with a higher income than me, and his house was spacious and well equipped. He was going on a New Year's trip with his family but couldn't bring his dog, Jax, and didn't feel comfortable leaving him at a pet hotel. I agreed to Peter's request since I didn't have any special plans for the holiday. I don't have any relatives other than my mother. When I was 18 and started university, my mother remarried, and I was happy to see her happy with her choice. Peter said I could invite my girlfriend over if I started feeling bored. He looked at me with a knowing smile after saying that, and then burst out laughing. I stayed at Peter's house for 2 days, and the first night was uneventful, nothing out of the ordinary. I just lay on the sofa, watched a few movies, and played with Peter's dog. The second night was also New Year's Eve, and I felt a sense of loneliness creeping into the air, amidst the distant sound of fireworks and the darkness that enveloped the unfamiliar house. Though I tried to enjoy the special atmosphere as the moment of the new year approached, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation, a touch of sadness lingering within me. I decided to invite my girlfriend over. She said she would be a little late because she was having dinner with her family. It was around 10 p.m. I was lying on the sofa and absent-mindedly yawning a few times when I heard a knock on the door. I thought it was my girlfriend, so I happily ran to open the door. But standing in front of me was a completely unfamiliar girl. She introduced herself as Peter's girlfriend and said she had come to collect a few things she had left behind in his bedroom. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the girl, but it wasn't her that caught my attention. It was the surprise that overtook me. I was surprised because Peter had never mentioned having a girlfriend in any of our conversations. We were very close and shared everything. I couldn't believe that he had a girlfriend and never told me about it. However, the girl seemed confident and at ease, as if she really knew Peter and this house well. Still, I remained cautious and tried calling Peter to confirm instead of letting her in right away. But the call went unanswered. He was probably busy with the party. I didn't want to make things difficult for the girl, especially since she kept insisting that she was Peter's girlfriend. After a moment of hesitation, I decided to let her into the house. She quickly made her way to Peter's bedroom. I stayed in the living room, watching TV. But honestly, I couldn't shake the feeling of curiosity, and there was still a bit of surprise lingering in my mind. A little while later, she came back downstairs, thanked me, and left without taking much. I sighed in relief, telling myself that I had reacted a bit too stiffly and skeptically. I returned to the dog and resumed watching the show, trying not to focus on the confusing thoughts in my mind. About half an hour later, my phone rang. It was Peter calling back. The sound of music, clinking glasses, and laughter. He was still having a great time at the New Year's party. Peter was concerned about his dog when he saw my 2 missed calls. After hearing me talk about the girl from earlier, Peter was silent for a moment. He stepped away to a quieter spot and told me to explain everything clearly. "Stephen, I don't have a girlfriend," Peter said, almost shouting, filled with surprise, panic, and I could sense a bit of frustration at my carelessness. Immediately my head spun, as if a bell had rung right next to my ear. Peter asked me to describe the girl in detail. I tried my best, but I couldn't remember much, just her body shape and a bit about her hair color. Peter sent me a series of pictures of the girls he knew, and none of them resembled the woman I had met. I kept the phone with Peter and ran up to his room. The valuable items he described, like the laptop, car keys, and watch, were still intact. Peter sighed and remained silent for a long while. He was probably feeling uncomfortable and even disappointed. As for me, I felt guilty for ruining the joyful moments Peter was having. I stayed awake almost the entire night, feeling confused and terrified, blaming myself a lot. I called my girlfriend and told her not to come, as I didn't want to cause any more trouble or discomfort for Peter. The next morning, Peter returned earlier than expected. Even though he didn't say a word of blame or show any signs of frustration, he actually thanked me a lot. But I still couldn't shake off the heavy feeling inside me. In the days that followed, things didn't get any better. One morning, Peter woke up and noticed signs of someone else being in the house. The front door was open, even though Peter was sure he had locked it before going to bed. Some small items had been moved, as if someone had been rummaging through them. A sense of fear filled the house, and Peter decided to call the police. I was there to explain everything that had happened on New Year's Eve. No belongings were stolen, and there were no signs of a break-in from the outside. But the scariest and most haunting feeling is knowing you are being followed, but not being able to figure out who it is. I had no idea what her intentions were, or what terrible things might happen next. Every night, Peter would hear small sounds echoing through the house. The sound of the floor creaking, footsteps softly padding on the carpet, as if someone was stealthily moving around the house. Sometimes Jax would bark frantically, but when we checked, there was nothing to be found. The atmosphere in the house became incredibly tense and suffocating. Due to work commitments and other relationships, Peter decided not to move to a new place, but to find a solution instead. Peter decided to install the most advanced cameras both inside and outside the house, and from that point on, the strange events ceased. The police continued to monitor the situation for several more months before officially closing the investigation. However, both Peter and I were still very confused, not knowing who that girl was, and whether she was the intruder or if there was another mysterious figure involved. I am James, a student at FSU, Florida. My family lives far away in Gruene, Texas, so I only go home during long breaks and on important holidays. I don't have any siblings. All of my parents' love and attention are focused on me. Each time I return, my parents are always joyful and happy. Everything was peaceful until the horrifying event that happened in the summer after I completed my first year at university. I joyfully hugged my parents, taking a deep breath of the familiar and peaceful air of home. The next day, I helped my dad clean up the backyard garden as I had promised. My family has a fairly large backyard, and when I was younger, I used to invite my friends over to camp overnight. After many years of neglect, my dad decided to clean it up and build a shed there. Thanks to my dad's plan, I was overjoyed to rediscover my treasure after many years of being forgotten. The treehouse on the large oak tree, that was the birthday gift my dad had carefully prepared for me when I turned 9. A feeling of nostalgia rose in my heart, as if a part of my memory that had been buried in the past suddenly awakened. Each crack, each loose piece of wood seemed to remind me of a time long past, the days when I was a child, running around here, laughing and playing with my friends. I used to be so happy and proud to own it. From that day on, I visited the treehouse every day, cleaning up, reinforcing the rotting stairs, and fixing the cracks caused by rain and wind. One evening, my parents went to a party at Uncle Jim's house, a longtime friend of our family. Since I wasn't feeling well, I declined to attend. While my parents were away, I decided to visit the treehouse once again, as a way to find some peace and reconnect with a forgotten memory. The dim light from the street lamp cast a faint glow onto the backyard, where the treehouse stood. The house seemed like a silent ghost, old and worn, with its gray roof fading over the years. Despite that, it still stood strong, as if waiting for me to return. I walked across the yard, my heart filled with mixed emotions, each step bringing me closer to my childhood days. I shuddered slightly, but didn't think much of it. I pulled the ladder up and climbed into the house. The space inside was cold and still. The old walls and the dusty bookshelf made me feel like I had just stepped through a time portal. I sat down on the old chair, trying to enjoy the peaceful feeling, but suddenly, a faint noise from outside startled me. I stood up, walked to the small window, and looked out into the backyard. Two figures were sneaking up toward my parents' house. The streaks of light from the street lamps cutting through the darkness made me realize they were holding guns. A wave of fear spread throughout my body, and I quickly pulled my phone from my pocket and called the police. But unfortunately, one of them noticed me, probably because I had spoken quite loudly in my fear. One of them shouted loudly, and without waiting for me to respond, he began heading toward the wooden house. In that moment, everything seemed to collapse. My heart raced, and my throat tightened. I meant to run, but I didn't have time. They were already very close, gripping their guns tightly and aiming them at me. In a moment of panic, an idea suddenly came to me. I rushed out the front door, and with all the strength I could muster, I pulled up the wooden ladder, at least cutting off their only way up. I shut the door and windows of the treehouse tightly, barricading myself inside, hoping the police would arrive soon. Luckily, my father had been very careful and meticulous when securing the locks on the house. When I heard the crunching footsteps outside the treehouse, the anxiety within me immediately turned into panic. A suffocating feeling spread through my body, and each breath seemed to make the air around me even more stifling. The feeling of fear spread like a wave, with every sound making me jump. The first gunshot rang out, a deafening blast that made my heart skip a beat, and I almost collapsed. The next gunshot rang out closer, followed by a series of bullets embedding into the wooden body of the house. One of them slipped through a rotten gap I hadn't had a chance to fix. I backed into the corner of the room, trying to stay calm, but the truth was, there was nowhere to hide. The house was too small and fragile. The two thieves continued to shout, curse, and threaten relentlessly. The sound of police sirens in the distance brought a sense of hope, but a part of me still didn't dare to breathe. The two thieves shouted curses before leaving. It took me quite a while to calm down and finally leave the treehouse. It was then that I called my parents. They returned in a panic and hugged me tightly. After more than 2 hours of playing hide and seek with the police, the two thieves were finally caught. Luckily, it only took me a few days for my mind to truly stabilize. The first thing I did was help my dad repair the treehouse. It was a beautiful part of my childhood memory, and also my savior in the moment I faced danger.
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.